Post-production. The moment where you can look back at what you shot and start to question how you ever thought this was going to work.
What the F is this?
I'm not going to lie, post-production can be a pretty difficult stage in the filmmaking process. You know, you have a certain amount of clay to work with, and that's it. They also say you write your film 3 times. Once when you write the script, once when you shoot the film, and once when you edit the film.
I don't know, man. That sounds like a lot of work.
At each of these stages, you might have to re-examine what the film you're making is based on the resources and materials you have before you. And that was certainly the case with this film, but we'll get into that later. Let's start with some practical stuff. On a budgeted film, you'd probably have a post-production coordinator. This is someone that keeps an overview of the progress of the film during post-production and facilitates communication between the people working on it, because it can get pretty complex depending on the type of film you're making. In the case of your film, you're probably going to be doing this. So it'd be best to have a document in which you're writing all of this down to keep track of things. I just make a document called post-production notes. Here I write down the different stages that the film will go through, who will be involved, and what needs to be done, and other key pieces of information. So the first stage is editing. You might want to include time for preparing for the edit. You might be generating proxies, which are lighter files if your original footage is too heavy for your computer. You might be synchronizing video and audio tracks if you are recording from different sources. In any case, this can take time, and it's best to account for it with a checklist so that you can see the progress you're making.
Clearly, we're getting nowhere with nobody.
Now, when it comes to the actual edit, you can get really lost in small changes, variations, and versions. This is why there are typically 3 milestones: the rough cut, the fine cut, and picture lock. You might have various versions between these, but you better set rough dates for these milestones and try to stick to them. These stages might look very different for different teams, but roughly speaking, the rough cut is the first version that gives a general feeling of what the film should be like, the structure, the rhythm, and so on. And the fine cut should already be quite a bit tighter and more polished, basically closer to what the final film will be. And then finally, the picture lock is the finished edit. That means the decision makers, director, editor, producers, depending on the contracts, have decided this is the finished edit of the film. No more changes will be made to the edit after this. Due to syncing issues with changing time codes in the following stages, it's important that the picture lock is respected.
There is an order to things.
Even though that's not always the case.
Crazy last minute changes you're making over here.
So what was this process like for Inhabitants? Well, it was pretty challenging and surprisingly personal, since I worked with a fantastic editor and close friend of mine, Kenza Madsen. It was a deep-reaching process. It often felt more like a therapy session than an editing session, because Ken's always tried to get back to the fundamentals. You know, what is the central concept of the film? Where is it coming from, and why is it being shown in this way? That helped us choose what the film needed and what was taken away from it. Ken's also immediately noticed issues with the flow of the scenes. I was initially insisting on chapter title cards for the scenes so that there would be a little numbered title sequence between each scene, but in the end we decided we needed more shots to help transition the scenes in a visual way, and it really made a big difference. So I went out and shot exteriors that I felt could match the scenes. We used these shots to provide a bit of breathing room and context for the scenes. We went through a lot of potential ideas in the editing process, some avant-garde stuff, prelude ideas, voiceover ideas, other shots that would change the context or match it. Although it was challenging to reopen things and question them again, I think going too far in different directions also kind of let us come back to what the film became in the end. I think rigidity in this case would have hurt the film quite a bit. So then we had our edit. Once you have a picture lock, you can start some of the next stages simultaneously, like sound design, music, and color grading. Remember, anytime you want to hand off your project to a new team member, you need to be able to tell them what you're looking for. Ideally, you have references and can explain what you like or what you have in mind. You can also just let them do their thing, but keep in mind that it might go in a completely different direction. That can also be part of the process. I mean, sometimes it's good to see things differently, but if you have a clear idea in mind and want to stay on track, I'd suggest having a clear plan and a way of communicating it.
This is how we're going to do it.
So for the music, I wanted a piece that was maybe slightly unusual and ideally performed by a string quartet, which is kind of a big ask for someone who doesn't have a budget or a string quartet.
Sometimes you gotta improvise.
So I wrote to a composer about doing an original piece, which ended up being outside of my price range, unfortunately.
You're broke, remember?
Then I wrote to a label to use an existing piece that fit quite well. They were also open to it, but they had a minimum fee for giving the rights to their music, and it was still too high for me, so I made an offer to pay some of the amount and to offer the rest in filming or editing services for one of their projects. They accepted the offer and I received the rights and the files. Just another reminder that if you don't have money, you can also offer other skills and things of value. For sound design, the person I wanted to work with wasn't available, so I had to do it myself. But since I mostly wanted very grounded and realistic soundscapes, I decided to take it on myself with the experience I already had. Then we moved on to the color grading. At this point, the deadline for one of the film festivals I wanted to submit to was coming up, so things were getting tight. The colorist we wanted to work with was abroad and we didn't have a clear workflow in place to get the files to him in time. This is where having a post-production coordinator would have been a huge help. In this case, the DP, John Miller, took on the color grading thankfully and did a great job, but as a learning experience, I don't think I would try to put pressure on the process of the making of the film in order to hit a festival deadline again. Don't forget, there are some final things you need to sort out before your film is ready to go. You need to sort out your end credits and make sure they're correct. Some people have stage names and some credits, like music credits, might have to be formulated in a certain way. You also need to think about subtitles depending on the language of your film and how you want to release it. My film had multiple languages in it, so subtitles were mandatory. Keep in mind, you might have to deliver your subtitles in a certain format for certain platforms or screenings. Speaking of screenings, in the event of a theatrical screening, you'll probably have to have your film in the form of a DCP or digital cinema package. This will require a bit of time and might not be cheap depending on who you're working with and where. Remember, these are all things that need to be in your plan and schedule if you need to finish things by a certain date. I thought I had a good plan until I started working through it. Always plan for the unexpected. There are always delays, so try to add a little buffer for potential surprises. Post-production can be very challenging mentally. It can take a lot more time and energy than you expect. You have to rethink a lot of things based on what works and what doesn't. You need a lot of persistence to push through every stage and not slow down. It's hard. You need to be the dynamo that keeps the project moving. So get the fuck out of here and make your film.
Oh!